Welcome back to the Stretch the Floor podcast. I'm Matthew. I'm here as always with Venusian, and today we had the opportunity to be joined by a really special guest, Joseph Casciaro, a senior writer at theScore. You may know him from his podcast, Pound the Rock, some of the videos he puts out on YouTube, and just all the great stuff they're always putting out there at theScore. We asked him a couple like NBA questions that are at the top of everyone's mind, like MVP talks, East race, West race. So he provided some really good insight, and I hope you guys enjoy this podcast. All right, we're joined by Joseph Casciaro, Cash from theScore. Thank you so much for taking time from your hectic schedule to join our pod. How you doing, man?
I'm doing well, man. Thanks for having me.
For those who don't know, Joseph is the senior writer at theScore, a senior writer at theScore, co-host of his own like awesome basketball podcast, Pound the Rock. Puts out awesome, like I said, awesome again, but just little 10-minute videos on YouTube. Really informative, really educational. I saw one a couple weeks ago about the NCAA and the G League Ignite and how it's kind of changing player development. That was really, really informative. Just like all around, really good content producer. Yeah,
No,
that's pretty much all I have to say.
I appreciate that, man. I appreciate all the love and appreciate you supporting the work and the content. And yeah, man, always, love to hear that people are enjoying the content and kind of getting out of it what I intend them to get out of it. So yeah, thanks again, man.
Yeah, well, theScore, like everyone over theScore is just like, it's kind of one of my go-to places for basketball content these days. It's really educational, really smart. What's it like to be part of that community? Because you're one of the main basketball guys there.
Yeah, I mean, it's in a lot of ways, it's like another home for me, man. I don't know if you're aware of this. I'm actually one of the longest tenured employees there, despite me not being that old. Basically, I started there in the summer between high school and university.
Oh, wow.
Part-time, and then I started full-time there once I finished university. So this fall will be 10 years that I've been full-time. This summer will be 14 years that I've been with the company. So I've been there since it was a TV station. Yeah. And then when the split happened and theScore sold, the TV part was sold to Rogers and became its own thing, and theScore, we stayed as an independent company that was digital only, and I kind of went with theScore into like this new venture. So yeah, I've been around the company, man. I've seen very different iterations of the company. I've been a part of 2 different features teams with the company. For a bit of time, I was a supervisor of the curated content side on the NBA side. So yeah, man, now we're doing video. I've literally seen it all with this company, and I've grown with it, and it's fun to be a part of for sure, man. Yeah, a very long way to answer your question of what the community's like there, but I guess it depends who you ask, but if you ask me, it's been good for me. The decade plus I've been there.
Yeah, no, but it's crazy how much it's changed with the times. Like you said, started as a TV station. Now it's like podcast. YouTube channel is like a really big thing you guys do. Obviously, a lot of writing, Twitter, stuff like that. It's really like kind of evolving and staying ahead of the curve, I think, and that's one of the things that, at least for me, is like why I get a lot of my basketball content from there.
Yeah, and now, I mean, we've got theScore Bet now too.
Yeah,
with single game wagering, hopefully soon, seems like it will be soon to be legal in Canada, and I'm sure it will be a big part of that. But we're already live. The betting app's already live in a few states as well, because more states are legalizing sports betting there as well. So yeah, I mean, definitely an exciting time to be part of the company for sure.
All right, so while we have an NBA expert on the pod with us right now, we're going to throw a couple hard-hitting questions at you that I think are on everyone's minds right now. So season ends today. Is Jokic the MVP?
I say so, yeah. I love Steph. I think, he's one of the most influential players ever, not just of his generation. What he's doing this year is insane, and he has an MVP caliber resume this season. But what Jokic is doing is even more. It's like this guy's been the best, second best, at worst, third best player from the beginning of the season till now. Like, there has not been a drop off. And I know you can point to the Nuggets record. I think they're the 4 seed or the 5 seed right now. Now they don't have Murray either, so they're probably not going to move up from that. And it's very rare that a guy wins MVP outside of the top 3 seeds. But I just think when you look at his body of work as a whole, and even where the Nuggets are, despite that, I could not give it to anyone else.
Yeah, it seems like the options right now, aside from Jokic, are Embiid, maybe. Steph has been getting a lot of buzz. Another guy who's Chris Paul, like he's not getting a ton of hype right now, but kind of the antithesis to the stats that Jokic and Steph are putting up. Like, he's a game back of the 1 seed in the entire league. He's putting up like a 9 assists and 5 boards or something like that. But like, if they do end up with that 1 seed, do you think he ends up like top 3 in voting, maybe even like top 2?
I mean, I think he's definitely going to get some like down ballot votes, and he'll be on the ballot by the end. I don't know if he'll end up 2 or 3 because, as you mentioned, even with Jokic, like Embiid and Steph,
Yeah.
I think it'll be tough to crack the top 3 if you're not one of those guys. But I mean, I can totally understand why people would give votes to Chris Paul. His ability to turn teams around and turn franchises around is insane. I mean, I've been saying it all year now. It looks like it will. I've been saying all year they're on pace to do it. I'm pretty sure they will do it now. But if the Suns win 60% of their games this season, which they're well on pace to do, this will be the 10th straight year that a Chris Paul team has won at least 60% of its games. 10th straight year, which is insane when you consider, like, okay, he's done it with 4 different franchises in those 10 years. He did it with New Orleans back in the day too, by the way, but then there was a bit of an interruption. But, he did it with the Clippers. Then he ends up in Houston and they have their best regular season ever and come within a Chris Paul hamstring of probably winning the championship that year. And then he goes to OKC, which was a team that everyone thought was tanking last year. And they end up winning 60% of their games, and goes to Phoenix, where they haven't made the playoffs in a decade, and they're going to win 60+% of their games. So his ability to impact winning, and not just in like I'll keep this mediocre team around 500. Like, his ability to actually turn mediocre teams into at worst fringe contenders is just unbelievable. And I know you had mentioned our YouTube channel as well, so I will shout out S, who does some of our YouTube content as well as Sparaheni did a video on Chris Paul's MVP candidacy last week, I believe. So people want to check that out.
Yeah, I saw that one too. But yeah, like, I think he finished second in MVP voting in his second year in the league or something like that.
Second or third year. It was 2007, 2008, which I still look. Kobe won it that year. Yeah, it was kind of like almost like a career achievement award because he hadn't won one yet, and everyone was like, and the Lakers ended up with the best record in the West that year. That was the year they traded for Pau Gasol. Like, Kobe had a great year that year, no doubt. But if you just look at who was the most valuable to their team that season, I think it was Chris Paul. If you look at that Hornets team and look at the roster they had, no disrespect to Tyson Chandler or David West, but that team had no business winning 58 games or whatever it was they won. And it was because of Chris Paul.
Yeah. And it's crazy how he's in I don't even know what year it is, but he's 30, 36, whatever. And like, you go to his basketball reference, sort the stats by like whatever. He's near the bottom of his own personal rankings this year and almost everything, but it's one of his most impactful, like, related to winning seasons he's ever had.
Think about how nuts it is that, we're sitting here talking. I'm mentioning that I think he was the deserved MVP in 2008. And we're sitting here 13 years later and talking about whether he's like top 3, top 5 in MVP voting.
Yeah. It's insane. Did you, before Harden went down, did you think he had any chance? Like, is he still top 5? Maybe it looks like he's not coming back the rest of the year. So
I didn't think he actually had a chance to win it, but that's more because I don't think enough people would have voted him, and not because I didn't think he deserved it. Like, the way he was playing and coming on before he got hurt again, I thought he had put himself in that conversation. Like, his stretch of play, I'd say from like a couple weeks into his Nets tenure, once he got settled there until just before he got hurt, was outrageous.
Yeah.
Like, he, especially because KD was in and out of the lineup, he instantly became their most valuable player, which is nuts when you consider that they already had KD and Kyrie's having a hell of a year himself.
Yeah.
Harden's kind of clownish behavior in trying to force his way out of Houston and get leverage to get out of there, I think, clouded people's opinion and made people forget why he had that power in the first place, because of how good he is and how dominant. Like, I was talking about Chris Paul, giving your team a chance to win.
Yeah.
James Harden is like, say what you will about his defense and whatever, his ball stopping ways. James Harden is almost like an automatic 50 wins and second round appearance, just having him on your team.
Yeah. And what was crazy to me is, like, we all obviously had the doubts. There's only one ball. There's 3 of these elite scorers on the same team, but like, we all knew Harden was one of the best passers, just period, in the entire league. And the second he got there, I mean, granted, they only played 7 games with the big 3 together, but like, he looked like the best point guard in the league the second he got there. 11 assists a game. The scoring went down like a few ticks, but like, he looks like a natural point guard, and he's like 6'7". It's just, he looks unstoppable out there no matter what he's trying to do.
I mean, Mike D'Antoni, when he first got to Houston, right, and made James Harden his de facto point guard, said right away at the time that he is a point guard, but at the time I think he said he's a points guard. But yeah, I mean, he is a point guard by nature in a lot of ways. Yeah, he can score like few other guys in history can, but he's also a very natural playmaker who does a lot of ball handling and carries the offensive load and can be an offensive quarterback. As a playmaker, he gets his teammates the best looks. It's not just about passing the ball, it's about where you're passing it, the kind of looks you're getting your teammates. I mean, I think you can make the argument he might be the best point guard in basketball. Like obviously we can, that's an argument for another day because we can talk Steph Curry. We just talked about Chris Paul. Yeah, exactly.
LeBron, what's a position anyway?
Right, exactly. NBA. I mean, like, Doncic could be, you know what I mean? Those guys are point forwards, but really they're point guards. So, but I think Harden's at least in that conversation. I think he's that good as a point guard or point guard if you're Mike D'Antoni.
Yeah, and so speaking of the Nets, like I said, they've only played 7 games and it doesn't look like they're going to play another game together the rest of this regular season. If you had to pick right now between the Nets and the Field to come out of the East, would you go Nets? Or would you go Field?
Yeah, I'd still go Nets. I think
still Nets.
Yeah, I'd go Nets as if they're healthy. Like even if they don't play a single game together the rest of the season, but if you can tell me those 3 guys are healthy when the playoffs are, or even when like the second round starts, I'm still taking the Nets. I just think, to be honest with you, if KD is 100% healthy, I might just say that's enough for me. I'm taking the Nets over the Field. If KD and Harden are both healthy, they're winning the East, and I don't think anyone has a chance in hell of stopping them. If Harden's out and it's KD and Kyrie, I still think they're winning the East, but I think they're a little more beatable. And then if KD's out, and it's just Kyrie and Harden, then I think they're more vulnerable. But I just think when you have that kind of top end talent and that like an abundance of it like that, your margin for error is so much bigger, right? Like the average team, if you were to lose to Kyrie Irving, it's like, well, season's over, better luck next year. This team, they could lose Kyrie Irving. And if KD and Harden are healthy, I'm still saying no one can beat them in the East. So
for a number 2 seed, I think they might have one of the hardest matchups with that Miami Heat team with Jimmy Butler, Bam. So that's going to be a tough matchup for them. And Harden being ruled out this early for the rest of the season, he's definitely going to be struggling throughout that first round matchup, trying to ramp up his activity and everything.
Yeah, I think it just depends on the way the seeding goes. Like if Miami ends up in the 7, even, Boston, like if Miami or Boston end up getting them in the first round, the Nets, I think, would still win the series. But yeah, that would be a lot more of a difficult matchup than any of us are envisioning for them. If one of Boston or Miami gets hot again, and I don't know, like the Knicks or the Hawks end up falling to 7, or if the Hornets catch it here and move up to 7, or if right now the Nets are 1. They've actually put some separation between themselves and Philly. If they end up 1 and avoid Boston or Miami, or like honestly even Toronto, if Toronto's healthy as an 8, could at least trouble them just because of their length and defensive versatility. I don't think they'd beat them, but they can trouble them. I think if Brooklyn avoids those 3 teams in the first round, I think they'll cruise through the first round and can kind of get Harden up to speed after that.
Yeah, and I think their defense is, it's obviously not elite, but I think it's catching a little bit of too much hate. Like, I don't know how much a game against the Raptors right now means, but like watching them against the Raptors last night, like they played some pretty good perimeter D, I think, in my opinion. Now, the Raptors don't have like a dominant like Embiid or Giannis or anything like that. But so like, I actually feel a little bit better about their defense than I think than some people. Do you see it as that big of a problem as some people are saying going into the playoffs?
I really don't, because I think their offense is that good and the ceiling is that good on that end of the court that I almost think it would render the defense moot. But even if you do want to place more of a premium on defense, like I think people forget how good Kevin Durant can still be defensively when he's fully engaged. If they go small and use him as like a rim protector, that's fine too.
Yeah.
And then I think they have like a lot of good sneaky under the radar defenders. Bruce Brown is solid. Nick Claxton.
Yeah.
Who's hurt right, or he might actually be out for health and safety protocols. I can't remember. He's out right now, but he's been like a revelation for them this season. He's kind of like a Swiss Army knife defensively. DeAndre has always been a bit of an overrated defender, but he's still a guy that'll like clean the defensive glass and is just a big body. I think they have more defensive problem solvers than people give them credit for. I mean, look, even Kyrie, who is a sieve most of the time, he's had moments in the playoffs, including in the finals, where like when he's locked in, he's at least passable defensively on the perimeter, like he can get it done on that end, or at least give you like a baseline defense. Harden is another guy. Like, yes, we know he is a terrible one-on-one defender at the point of attack, but He is one of the best switching defenders when it comes to like guarding up as a guard. Like take him into the post thinking you have a mismatch.
Mhm.
You don't, because he's that freakishly strong. You can't score him out in the post. He's not a bad help side defender. So look, are they a good defensive team? No, but I also don't think they're like as historically bad as people make them out to be. They're good enough, I think, on that end, where when you combine it with the historic offensive talent they have, they should be fine.
Yeah, I agree. So if we're penciling Brooklyn into the finals, do you still feel like it's going to be against the Lakers, or because like LeBron should be coming back with a little bit of runway at the end of the regular season? If they can stay out of that play in, like that's all, the whole West is so up in the air right now, especially with the Nuggets, like Murray going down. I don't really know what to make of it. I would still pick the Lakers in the West, but I wouldn't be shocked if a team like Phoenix or the Clippers, who are red hot right now, made a run at it.
Yeah, I think, again, if LeBron and AD are healthy, that's the team I'm picking to come out of the West. And to be honest, if they're both fully healthy, I'd still pick them to win the title, even over the Nets.
Yeah, so
I think they've done what they've needed to do. Like AD missed a bunch of time. LeBron, they've obviously kept him out of line. They want to make sure that he's fully right and ready when he comes back. And they've, for the most part, survived without those guys. I mean, they're fifth, which I know isn't great for the defending champs with the talent they have, but considering who they've been missing and what the rest of the roster looks like, they've actually done a decent job during that time. And their defense, especially like in the games without either of LeBron or AD, they still maintained a top 4 defensive rating. Like that team is legit on the defensive side of the ball. I think the best case scenario for the Lakers, and it's actually shaping up that way right now, if you look at the bracket, if they stay in the 4-5 and match up against a Murray-less Nuggets team, and then were to get, say, Utah in the second round, look, I respect what Utah's done, but I think Phoenix is a tougher matchup for LA because they have the kind of big forwards that can actually trouble LeBron at least a little bit. And then I think the Clippers obviously are probably their toughest matchup. So I think the best case scenario for the Lakers is you avoid either of the Clippers or Suns until the West Finals. And I think that's the way the bracket's shaping up right now, where they can get a Murray-less Nuggets team, probably beat the Jazz, and then, the Suns and the Clippers would beat each other up, and knock one of each other out. So I think it's actually shaping up right now like a pretty good bracket for the Lakers if they get LeBron back healthy.
Yeah, for sure. As for the Clippers, or you go ahead.
Yeah, I was going to say the Nuggets still have Aaron Gordon, who historically has guarded LeBron James really well. So that'll be still a tough matchup for him, but he has enough time to ramp up. So the loss of Murray, I think they should still overcome that matchup.
Yeah.
I think the Suns are getting a little overrated though. I just can't see Devin Booker, like him against an elite defender. He hasn't had the opportunity to go against them that much. So that would be interesting to see too.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, we gotta see it first, right? Like it's kind of one of those things, you gotta believe it to see it, but you gotta see it to believe it. But we also can't write him off just because he hasn't been given that opportunity yet. And I do think, like, I don't think the Suns are going to beat the Lakers, but I really do think just the way they're constructed, like I think the strengths of Booker and Paul, it's like a guard duo made in heaven. The things they can do on the ball, off the ball, shooting wise, like multi-level scores, it's perfect. Ayton, I think, is actually like settling into a pretty nice role as more of a defensive big man. He's still not great on that end, but he's getting better and he's kind of playing his role. Mikal Bridges has been a revelation. And then between Bridges and Crowder, they've got the size, I think. Like you mentioned Gordon going up against a guy like LeBron. I think the thing with the Suns, they have like multiple of those guys, right? Which is huge, in a matchup against the Lakers to have different guys on LeBron, but also when you play the Clippers and you need someone to guard George and Kawhi. I think the Suns have, no one's going to stop those guys, but between Bridges and Crowder, they have as two good guys as you can imagine trying to fill those roles. And then like Saric has been an awesome small ball center off the bench. So I think for the most part, like the Suns are pretty loaded and pretty ready for the playoffs. If they fall short because they lose a tough matchup to the Clippers or Lakers, I wouldn't even end up saying it's like a bad season or a failure. It's just like only one team can win,
Yeah, definitely not a bust of a season if they lose to one of those two teams.
Yeah, I would pick a fully healthy Lakers over both the Suns and Clippers too. But it's kind of interesting how this Clippers run, this win streak that they went on, kind of directly coincides with Rondo starting to play like real minutes for them. That's something that they so glaringly needed last year. Like Kawhi had most of the playmaking duties, was running a lot of pick and roll and stuff like that. Do you feel like Rondo, like playoff Rondo, is going to be a thing again this year, and he's going to maybe turn around the fortunes for the Clippers?
Man, I'm not even the biggest Rondo fan, and yet I've been one of the biggest preachers of the playoff Rondo gospel the last few years because it's like at some point you just can't deny it. He's been, I mean, this year he's actually been solid enough in the regular season, but before this year, like I'd say it's been like 4 to 5 years in a row where he has been atrocious in the regular season, and then the playoffs come and he's like a legit difference maker. And yeah, I think based on what we've seen the last few years and then what he's provided this regular season to the Clippers, I think you'd have to expect him to be, again, not like a star level player in the playoffs, but an impact player, you know, a guy that can do what you need him to do as kind of like a secondary playmaker, ball handler, whatever you want to call it. And yeah, I think the Clippers especially really needed that.
Yeah, for sure. So, and I mean, I was super hyped for the Nuggets. Like, I have a Murray jersey right behind me. Jokic, obviously, we know what he's doing. I thought, like, when they added Gordon, I was kind of blown away by how, like, cohesive and, like, complete they looked as a 5-man team with the, like, a three or four deep off the bench. It's not going to happen this year without Murray, but how do you think the playoffs looks for them? Like, if they, I don't know, like, can they still win a series? I guess it would depend on who they get in the first round, right?
That's the thing. I mean, the way the bracket is now, I would say no, because it's going to be against the Lakers. But it really is a shame, man, because I like a lot of people, I thought they, more than any other team, raised their championship odds at the deadline, far greater than any other team did. And I think, I think, you know, people always talk about contenders and fringe contenders and this team and that team. But like, if we were actually honest with ourselves, the group of true title contenders, like teams that legitimately can win a championship every year, is very, very, very small. 12 franchises have won a championship the last 40 years. And just the way basketball is, it's a very star-driven sport. The best players have the ball in their hands and are on the court, you know, in the playoffs 40 of 48 minutes. It's tough to win unless you're one of the top 2, 3, 4 teams at worst with one of those top-tier stars. But I actually legitimately think that with the Gordon trade and the depth they had and the way Jokic is playing, the way we know Murray can perform in the playoffs, like I really do think the Nuggets had entered that stratosphere. And so that's what I think is most disappointing about it. Obviously, the most disappointing thing is for Murray himself.
Yeah.
But from a team perspective, from a league perspective, the most disappointing part is that like a team that had actually just put themselves legitimately in the championship conversation, honestly, maybe for the first time in franchise history, probably the first time in franchise history, that they were in the true conversation, not in the fringe conversation. That, 2 weeks after the deadline, it all went up in smoke. It just sucks.
Yeah, totally agree with everything you said there. Okay, one more thing before we let you go. We're all Raptors fans here. We're all diehard Raptors fans here. This has kind of been the season from hell for the Raptors. Yeah. Like, they somehow find themselves like looking at decent lottery odds. I think I've been up and down on that a little bit, but I would definitely not mind a top 5 pick in this draft. There are a lot of interesting players at the top there. Just how are you feeling right now as a Raptors fan? Like, do you even care if they get to play in? Like, where's your head at right now?
I don't care so much about it, but I also look, if the thing I'm trying to remind people is that, like, because I know there's been this big divide between like pro tank and pro go for the play.
Yeah.
And I do understand the pro tank part. Like, I get it. The opportunity was there for the Raptors to have one of those weird blip years where it's like, okay, everything went wrong. You end up with this great pick, but you're not like starting from nothing. Like, you're going to be able to add a great pick in a potential like generational draft, potentially, if some of these guys are as good as they could be, to a core of Siakam, Anunoby, Van Vliet, now Trent, Flint. Like, that is a very rare opportunity for franchises to get. So I totally get all that. The problem is it just didn't work out that way. Like, this is what I try to tell people when they think that, that they didn't tank well enough. It's like, the night the Raptors fell out of the top 10 finally for the first time, I think it was like March 14th, March 15th. They fell out of the top 10. Okay. In the first 17 games after falling out of the top 10, they went 5-12. And in those 30 days that they went 5-12, you know how many spots they dropped further in the standings? 0. So then they start getting guys back and they start resting guys to the point where they're catching fines because they are obviously tanking. That game against OKC, if you look at their like crunch time lineup, it was like a rookie, Flynn, Gillespie, I think Hood, Watanabe, and I can't remember who else. Like, if you look at that where they went 5-12, then look at how they rested guys, then look at some of the lineups they used, like, it's like, man, what do you think they were trying to do? They clearly knew, like, they knew the same things we knew about the chances to get a great pick in this draft and add it to that court. It just didn't work because the teams around them were even worse. Like I said,
Yeah.
to go 5-12 and not drop a single spot in the standings is insane. To use the lineup they used that night against OKC and win an NBA game is hilarious, but it's because OKC's 5-man lineup was somehow worse. Like, at this point, what I'm trying to say is, like, even if they do crap the bed and go on like a 6-game losing streak, it's barely going to alter their lottery odds.
Yeah.
And that's why I'm just like, just enjoy every game, see what comes out of it, hope to continue to see growth from Anunoby and Flynn, get Trent back in the lineup, see what, like, if the young guys are playing well and they end up in a playoff spot because of it, and then who knows, maybe they scare one of like Philly or Brooklyn in the first round, just enjoy it, because there's like the alternative. It's not like they're selling out to try to make the 8 seed and lose in the first round, or they traded youngsters for veterans to do it. I think they actually had the intentions were to go the opposite way, and it just didn't work because there's too much crap around them in the standings. Yeah. So at this point, it's just like, enjoy it. It is what it is.
Yeah, what we've been advocating is just enjoy this as like the Lowry for farewell tour.
Exactly.
Because most likely he's going to get signed and traded. So enjoy him while you can.
I still think there is a possibility he's back on like a 2 or 3 year deal and ends his career here. But I mean, it depends. It depends on what the sign and trade options are for him. If they can add more to the younger core, depending on what other teams are offering, depending on how high they're willing to go with a contract for him. But I don't think it's completely out of the question that he's back for another couple of years, or maybe even 3 years after this.
Yeah, that's always a possibility, because we can always trade him down further in line too.
Yeah.
But I think they're going to go hard for a center, especially someone like Holmes, which if they give up Lowry, they're going to have around 20 million to work with.
Yeah, they could have anywhere. They could have like 25 mil to work with in a best case scenario. And that's while still retaining Trent, because he's an RFA. So, I mean, it's a really interesting offseason. And that's the thing too. Like, this team's, whatever they are, 10 games under 500, but we know that this isn't actually a 10 games under 500 team. This is a team that back home next year with even just average health and the guys continuing kind of on the trajectory they're on can turn this thing around so quickly.
Yeah, we saw when they added literally like 2 below average league average centers in Kem Birch and Freddie Gillespie. They started winning. They're a winning team again suddenly, right? Like just a slight upgrade at the 5 position, just like did that much for this team. So
a guy who can catch the ball and do just like average big man things. Amazing what he was able to do for this team.
Baines has not a fun Baines year this year. No. Okay, I think that's a good place to stop it. Joseph, thank you so much for taking the time to join us. Really had a good time talking to you. And anything else you need to plug that I maybe forgot at the top?
No, man. I think you covered all the bases and praising us at the beginning. The app and the podcast, Pound the Rock, and the Score on YouTube. Hit the Instagram channel as well. No, man, you covered all the bases, and like I said, appreciate all the love. And I'm glad I was finally able to do this with you guys.
All right, sounds good. Thanks, man, and keep doing good work. Getting all that stuff, it all really helps.